move to question time. Senator Hume.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Under Labor, Australia's core inflation is higher than comparable economies including the US, the UK, Canada, Japan, the euro area, Sweden, Norway, Switzerland and New Zealand. And our economic growth is lower than comparable nations like the US and the UK, with some comparable nations already starting their interest rate easing cycles. Minister, why is it that after 3 Albanese Labor budgets, Australians are saddled with an entrenched per capita recession, negative productivity, sticky inflation and interest rates staying higher for longer?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, and I thank Senator Hume for the question. And I think those opposite, all of them need to go and see a doctor, because I think they have the worst case of corporate and political amnesia that I have ever seen.
Order. Order. Senator Henderson, I'd love to call you. I'm just waiting for your colleagues in particular to recognise that you're standing and to give you the silence you deserve.
Thank you, President. Point of order on reflecting on all senators on this side. Given it's Dementia Week, given the many implications of what
thank you, Senator Henderson. Senator Henderson, there was no particular reference to any particular senators, so thank you, Senator Henderson. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and I withdraw if it makes question time run smoother. But the point I was making is there seems to be no memory of when they were in government, when inflation in the quarter that they left government was the highest quarter that we've experienced in inflation growth. Well, thank you, Senator Birmingham. Okay, so it was lower, right? Okay, so then Senator Hume just drew the comparison of the United States. So do you, Senator Birmingham, accept that inflation peaked higher in the United States? Well, Senator Birmingham shouldn't be disorderly and interject. Well, I think the point that Senator Birmingham made well for me is when you use international comparisons to make a political point, as you've just done, it is important to understand the facts, which is that inflation peaked higher in the United States, and inflation peaked later here and lower here. And that is a good thing, that it peaked lower here, because, of course, when you've got inflation, it hits households, and that's the point. And interest rates were higher in the US than they ever reached here, or they're currently at 4.3%. They were over 5% in the United States. So inflation higher and interest rates higher. So when you draw the international comparison, let's actually be upfront and honest. We have a lot going for us in this economy. We have inflation moderating. We have wages growing.
Thank you,
we
Minister.
have a strong labour market.
Has expired. Senator Hume.
Thank you, Madam President.
First supplementary.
Madam President, ABS data shows that since the election of the Albanese Labor government, real disposable income in Australia has gone backwards by 8.7%. That's a worse outcome than comparable countries. Given your repeated justification that interest rates peaked later and lower in Australia, why is it that the disposable income of Australian households has been hit harder than in comparable countries?
Great question.
Order. Order. Senator McKenzie and Senator Watt. Both of you are very fortunate to have voices which project across the chamber. Question time is not the time to exercise your voices. I'm asking you to listen in respectful silence. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Hume for the question. And we've made no secret that we accept households have been doing it tough with the inflation challenge. That is true for households not just in Australia but around the world, as the world deals with the post-COVID inflation challenge that every country has seen. And that is why, Senator Birmingham, we have introduced all of that cost of living support that we could responsibly do without adding to the inflation challenge to help households. So we accept that households
Senator
are doing
Cash.
tough, which is why cheaper medicines, better access to Medicare, investments in housing, investments in rent relief, investments in energy bill relief, all of that matters. And that's why we're confused about why you come in here and complain about it, but when you look at your voting record, it actually shows you voted against it. Our focus is on relief for households and making sure this inflation challenge continues to moderate.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Hume's second supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. Minister, will Australian households see their disposable income recover at all this financial year, or will Australians ultimately have endured 3, potentially 4 Labor budgets only to see their household income go backwards while government spending keeps surging?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Gallagher.
Well, households are getting a lot more support than they would have under your economic plan. Our economic plan is about not adding to the inflation challenge, helping households through this, creating jobs, getting wages moving again. Your economic plan is to cut $315 billion from Commonwealth spending at a time when our economy is hardly growing. That is your economic plan. Our economic plan is working. We've got jobs growth. We've got growth in the economy. We've got wages moving again. We've got cost of living relief flowing through to households, and we're putting down the foundations of growth through our Future Made in Australia plan, which, again, you oppose. So every step that we are putting in place to make sure our economy has the right support for the future is opposed by those opposite.
Senator Green.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Minister, making housing more affordable matters to young Australians, as well as those under pressure from the cost of living. Can the Minister explain how delays to the Albanese Labor government's housing reforms, engineered by Mr Peter Dutton and Mr Bant, will impact the cost of living, particularly for renters and those trying to buy a home of their own?
Thank you, Senator Green. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President, and thanks to Senator Green for her question, and thank you for your 2-minute statement which went through some recent announcement about more housing in your home state of Queensland, in Cairns. Our government's priority is helping all Australians with the cost of living. We've delivered tax cuts for every taxpayer and energy bill relief. And we're delivering cheaper medicines, cheaper groceries, cheaper childcare, fee-free TAFE, HECS relief and more homes, because that is what makes a difference to Australians' cost of living. And this week we've tried to deliver even more homes for 40,000 low and middle income Australians. Labor's Help to Buy plan is action that helps Australians who've worked hard and saved but still can't afford a deposit. But what do these Australians hear from Mr Dutton and the Liberals? Well, it's the same as always. No. No, no, no. Liberals don't want to help Australians with the cost of living. They think that if they make the problem worse, it'll be better for them politically. It'll be better for them politically, which is why they've tried to block every cost of living measure we've introduced, then come in here and complain about cost of living. They've offered no help, no plans for people struggling, just more negativity, and then they cuddle up to the Greens to help push urgent housing reforms down the track. Now, remember, President, these delays were deliberately engineered by Mr Bant's Greens party and Mr Dutton's Liberal party. They were deliberately engineered because they don't care that it means Australians on low and middle incomes now have to wait longer to buy a house. It doesn't affect them, so it doesn't matter to them. Mr Dutton and the Liberals created the housing crisis. The Albanese government is trying to fix it, and the Liberals and the Greens are deliberately getting in the way.
Thank you, Minister. Senator McKenzie, can you stop deliberately shouting across the chamber? If you can't listen in Senator McKenzie, if you can't listen in silence, I invite you to leave the chamber. Senator Green.
Minister, the Community Housing Industry Association has welcomed the Albanese Labor government's first round of funding for social and affordable housing under the Housing Australia Future Fund. Chia CEO Wendy Hayhurst said, "It's heartening to see the Commonwealth taking decisive action to address Australia's housing crisis." And today, the Prime Minister announced even more social and affordable housing in far north Queensland. Can the Minister detail that announcement and explain the Albanese Labor government's plans to further boost social and affordable housing?
Time for answering has expired. Minister Wong.
Thank you, Senator Green. And it says a lot about when those who work at the coalface of homelessness and domestic violence services support Labor's housing plans, but the Liberal Party and the Greens political party do not. Those on the front lines know that the problems that the Liberal government created over 9 years can't be fixed overnight. And as Ms Hayhurst has said, when you're tackling a housing crisis that has been decades in the making, the key is to show long-term commitment and to steadily make inroads, and that is what our government is doing. As Senator Green said, the Prime Minister was in Cairns this morning, unlocking even more social and affordable housing. This is Queensland's biggest ever social and affordable housing project with 490 homes. The biggest ever social and affordable housing project with 490 homes, so they don't like it. They don't like more social and affordable housing in this country, including
Thank you, Minister. The time
Cairns.
for answering has expired. Senator Green, second supplementary.
Minister, a report authored by a top economist, Sal Eastlake, has found that using superannuation for a housing deposit would make homes more expensive, hinder the home ownership of young Australians, reduce retirement incomes and lead to significant long-term costs to the federal budget. Can the minister explain while the Albanese Labor government's housing reforms will help young Australians now and in the long run?
Thank you, Senator Green. Minister Wong. Order across the chamber. Order. Senator Watt. Minister Wong.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Green, for your question. And can I say this? The Albanese government's housing reforms will help young Australians now and in the future, because we want to help 40,000 low and middle-income Australians yesterday. Mr Dutton's only plan is to let young people raid their super to get into the market, which will only drive up house prices and leave young Australians worse off by the time they retire. According to Mr Eastlake, if super for housing was introduced, it would be one of the worst public policy decisions in 6 decades. It would do little for the people who are most in need of assistance and will do most for those who need it least. Super for housing, listen to this, would just make the affordability crisis worse. Super for housing would just make
Minister Wong, please use your... Senator Davey, to cup your hands and yell across the chamber is incredibly disrespectful. I've asked you to listen in silence. That is what I expect. Minister Wong.
Your policy would just make the affordability crisis worse. It would make it worse, but you don't care.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Green. Oh no, I think we're done. Beg your pardon. Sorry, Senator Duniam.
President, thank you very much. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for the Environment, Senator McAllister. Last week in
Order.
So they don't find it interesting. Well, last week in answer to a question relating to McPhillamys gold mine, you said the minister made her decision out of deference to the law. Given you claim the law is the reason for this job-destroying decision, will you change the law so it never happens again? Yes or no?
Thank you, Senator Duniam. Minister McAllister.
Well, thanks, President. We're back on this subject again. I have been clear on behalf of the minister that the minister does apply the law assiduously when decisions are put before her. And it's a different approach to the approach that's been advocated by those opposite, who over the course of the last couple of weeks have essentially advocated that projects they like should be approved and projects they don't like should be rejected.
It's not your question.
Based on who the applicant is and based on the technology that the applicant or the proponent is bringing forward. Well, that is not the approach taken by the government. Incidentally, it's not dissimilar to what we get from down the other end of the chamber, because we get a very similar kind of proposal from the Australian Greens, who routinely come into this chamber and demand that the minister reject this proposal or that proposal. None of this is in the national interest. What is in the national interest is an actual framework that allows proponents and community organisations and ordinary people to understand the law that applies and to understand and have confidence that the minister will indeed apply that law impartially based on the evidence that is before her.
Please resume your seat. Senator Duniam.
Point of order on relevance, President. I did ask specifically whether the government, who write the laws of this country, would change the laws, not apply the ones that exist.
And Senator Duniam, you also referred to the way in which the minister made the decision in the first part of your question, and the minister is being relevant. Minister McAllister, please continue.
Thanks, President. Well, the senator asks about law reform, and I had understood that there was a consensus across this chamber that law reform in relation to cultural heritage was required. After the Juukan Gorge disaster, all parties, including the Liberal Party, as I understood, undertook to reform these laws. Indeed, Ms Lee was one of the people who made numerous public comments about this. This law reform process is underway, and the reform processes for these laws and others in this area are ones we would hope you would support.
Senator Duniam, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. I refer the minister to an answer she gave in November of 2023 relating to the salmon industry being under threat by this government because, as the minister said, this review into that industry was required by law. Given this review could destroy 5,000 jobs and that entire industry, will you commit to changing these laws so it never happens again? Yes or no?
Thank you, Senator Duniam. Minister McAllister.
Thank you very much, President. Well, I think as senators in this chamber understand, the minister has been required by law to undertake a reconsideration of the arrangements for salmon farming in Macquarie Harbour. And she's been very clear about her obligations under the law to do so. This is not a review that was initiated by the government, but it is a review that is required under the law. And again, in this chamber, we have one group of people saying the minister should make a decision based on their preferences. On this side of the chamber, we have another group of senators asserting that the minister should make decisions based on their preferences. Well, again, the minister will apply the law. It happens that a review of the EPBC Act and the framework around it is underway. There is legislation before this chamber that you could commit to vote for, but thus far you have not done so. And I invite you to actually stump up and vote for the legislation.
Answering has expired. Senator Duniam, second supplement.
Thank you. No commitment to workers anywhere. Given the minister has now said twice that the law is the law and refused to change the laws in a way that ensures we end uncertainty for investors, the community and workers, how can Australians anywhere have any faith this Labor government will ever put regional jobs ahead of Green votes in Sydney and Melbourne?
Thank you, Senator. Waiting for silence. Minister, Senator Whish-Wilson, I've just called for silence. That applies to you. Minister McAllister.
Well, thanks very much, President, and I am certainly very pleased to be invited to speak about this government's commitment to regional jobs and regional investment, because I would point the opposition to the many initiatives that our government is supporting to actually see a rejuvenation of our industrial base, to see a rejuvenation of our regions, to diversify our economy. Perhaps I could refer to the $7 billion over the decade to strengthen Australia's critical mineral supply chains through the new critical minerals production tax incentive, something I believe you are opposed to. Perhaps we could talk about $1.7 billion over the decade for the Future Made in Australia Innovation Fund, supporting Future Made in Australia priority sectors, many of which are based in regional Australia. Perhaps we could talk about the $566 million for Geoscience Australia to progressively map the whole of Ontario Australia.
Thank you, Minister McAllister. The time for answering has expired. Senator McKim.
Thanks very much, President. My question's to Senator Wong, representing the Prime Minister. Senator, over the next decade, Labor plans to hand out $176 billion in tax concessions to property speculators through negative gearing and the capital gains tax discount. These pour fuel on the fire of Australia's housing crisis, contributing to massive price rises that have locked millions of Australian renters out of home ownership and made it easier for an investor to buy their 9th or 90th property than it is for someone trying to buy their first home. Minister, do you accept that these tax breaks push up house prices and massively disadvantage renters trying to get into the property market? Why won't Labor negotiate with the Greens to curtail these tax handouts so more people can afford a home, rather than taking a bulldozer approach on your Help to Buy bill legislation, which will only make matters worse?
Thank you, Senator McKim. Order. Senator Ayres, order. Minister Wong.
No, I'm calm. I haven't had much sleep, so everything. Senator McKim, you know what our housing policy is, and you have spent days working with Senator Birmingham, working with the Coalition to prevent more houses being made available to low and middle income Australians. So I understand. I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon.
Order.
President.
Oh, just a moment. Let me call you. So, Senator Watt.
President, I'd ask that Senator Henderson withdraw the remarks that she just made across the chamber. She knows very well what she just said.
Thank you. And just a moment, Senator Wong. I would just urge all senators to be mindful. One, it's your responsibility to control your behaviour in this place. It is your responsibility to control what you say and what you don't say. I'm asking you to be mindful of that. We should not have to be seeking withdrawals for comments that are unparliamentary. Minister Wong, please continue.
Thank you. What I was saying, Senator McKim, you and your party have spent days in this place ensuring that we could not even bring the legislation to a vote. And you know why you didn't want it to come to a vote? Because you were embarrassed. You were embarrassed.
Order.
You are embarrassed. You are embarrassed, and we went through all these shenanigans in this place, including what we saw the other day, because you wanted to avoid a vote, because you are embarrassed, because you know you are voting against 40,000 houses for low and middle income Australians. And now you ask a question about your demands and some attempt to try and tell people that actually we didn't vote with Mr Dutton and the Coalition to ensure Labor couldn't deliver 40,000 houses to low and middle income Australians. You interject on me because you don't like the truth. The truth is you have been working with them to prevent us implementing our policy. And now you come in here and you bleat about the fact that we haven't adopted your policy. I mean, really. The fact is you're working with the Coalition to stop houses being built. That is the truth, and you should be ashamed.
Thank you, Ministers. Senator McKim.
Thanks, President. We're very proud of trying to stop you making the housing crisis worse, Senator. But earlier this year,
Senator McKim. Senator Watt, you may not have noticed, but I've actually been waiting for you to stop. Senator McKim, please continue.
Thank you. Minister, you were happy to revise your stage 3 tax cuts because circumstances had changed. The housing crisis has got massively worse since Labor came to power. Why won't you negotiate with the Greens to help fix this massive societal calamity?
Thank you, Senator McKim. Minister Wong.
Thank you. Well, I'll take what Senator McKim said about being proud. Are you proud of delaying the more houses for low and middle income Australians? Are you proud of voting with Mr Dutton and the coalition, who only want those who have, only some people to have the benefit of home ownership? Are you proud of the spokesperson for the Greens, who is against 3,000 social and affordable housings in his electorate? Are you proud of that? Are you proud of that? Are you proud of all the ways in which the Greens come in here after having opposed social housing, affordable housing in their own electorates, and then come in here and vote with Peter Dutton to prevent us delivering more social and affordable housing? Are you proud of all that, Senator McKim?
Thank you, Minister. Senator McKim, second supplementary.
Yeah, we're very proud of Mr Chandler Mather running rings around the Prime Minister, I'll tell you that. Senator, is your government seriously so committed to handing over $176 billion in tax concessions to property speculators, to disadvantaged renters, that you would actually go to a double dissolution election to defend those obscene tax handouts?
Order. Order. Senator McKim, you have finished your question. Minister Wong.
Well, first, Senator, we're going to give you another opportunity. So we will reintroduce this bill. We will reintroduce this bill, a version 2, and we will give the Senate another opportunity, just as we did on the HAF, just as we did on the Housing Affordability Fund, which you also delayed. We will give you another opportunity to vote for it. But what I would say to you is your interjection about Mr Chandler Mather, it really shows what you're all about, isn't it? It's all about the politics. It's all about the politics. It's all about his profile. It's all about him building his brand. We're about building houses. You're about building your brand. We're about building houses. And you know what's really fascinating is that this person, the member for Griffith, who's happy to stand on a stage with pictures of a Prime Minister.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Grogan.
My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Today we've seen further evidence that the Albanese Labor government's economic plan is working, with almost 1 million jobs created under Labor. This is in addition to record-high workforce participation and gender pay gap down to a record low. Inflation in Australia is moderating. In fact, it's halved from its peak in 2022, and our rates are still lower than the US, even after today's rate cut. How has Labor's economic plan enabled the government to provide cost-of-living relief whilst putting downward pressure on inflation?
Thank you, Senator Grogan. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Grogan for her question. It's an important one about the Albanese government's economic plan and how today in the labour force data we saw that 47,500 jobs were added to the economy in August, and the unemployment rate has held steady at 4.2%. This is a good outcome. We want more people in jobs. More people in jobs, earning more and keeping more of what they earn. This has been a record number of jobs created on our watch in any other term of parliament in Australia's history. Participation rate remains high at 67.1% and is at a record high for women, showing that our economic plans around addressing gender inequality across the economy are also working. Our investments in early education and care, so that more women can choose extra hours if they want to, are being reflected in the participation rate. Almost 978,000 new jobs have been created under this government, and that is something that this entire chamber should celebrate, because we know that having a job is so important to making sure families can keep ahead of budgets in their households. And so we've also got seeing inflation moderate again. We inherited inflation with a 6 in front of it. It's coming down in welcome ways. We would like, of course, to see that continue down, and we'll have the monthly CPI figures out next week. We're also seeing wages growing. Again, a big contrast between this government and those when they were in government. Remember the deliberate design feature to keep wages low. That is what the opposition did. We have got wages moving again. We're delivering surpluses. And we are making sure that the budget is in much better shape.
Senator Grogan, first supplementary.
That's great news, Minister. Thank you. Whether it's housing, super unpaid parental leave, cost protections for workers or a future made in Australia, Labor is committed to a better future for all Australians. We have pursued these policies in the Senate this week because we know they will improve the lives of all Australians. Minister, why is Labor's policy agenda the right one for all Australians?
Thank you, Senator Grogan. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, President. I thank Senator Grogan for that supplementary too, and drawing attention to our plans on housing, which we have been debating here this week, super on PPL, which passed this chamber in a fantastic vote earlier today, cost protection for workers or a future made in Australia. All of those are those key policies and key features of our economic plan. We've got the tax cuts rolling through. We've got cheaper childcare. We've got cheaper medicines. We've got the Medicare urgent care clinics, which are being so successful. Tripled the bulk billing incentive rate. We've got the fee-free TAFE places, the energy bill relief that's rolling out to households now. We've extended paid parental leave. And importantly, for those who live on payments, we have managed to find room to increase support for job seekers and single parents, because we know that people on payments do it tough as well. This is part of our carefully calibrated economic plan, and it is working in the interests of all Australians.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Grogan, second supplementary.
Thank you. This week in the Senate, the Albanese Labor government has been pushing back against the blockers. We want Australians to be homeowners. We want Australians to get super paid on their parental leave. And we want to further improve the rights of Australian workers. And we want a future made in Australia. What are the roadblocks that the government is facing in delivering our policy agenda?
Thank you, Senator Grogan. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Senator Grogan. Well, the roadblocks are there and they're around there. Just stops where Senator Faruqi is. They're the blockers. They're the blockers. They're the ones that have voted. They are the ones that have voted to block a very sensible Help to Buy housing program that would get 40,000 people out of renting and into home ownership. That was the reform that the Senate voted to delay this week, and it is a real shame. And I think the thing about the Senate-only week is that people have been able to see the Senate taking part in that block. They've been seeing the very unhealthy alliance, the legislative hugging that's been going on from the Greens, the National Party and the Liberal Party to block a sensible housing policy. A Help to Buy to hit 40,000 people into home ownership, and this Senate voted to delay it.
Senator Tyrrell.
My question is for Senator Watt, representing the Minister for Education. Teach for Australia is one of 2 programs under the High Achieving Teachers program, funded by the Australian Government to place high-quality teachers in disadvantaged schools facing workforce shortages. An evaluation of the Teach for Australia program in 2017 found participants became high-quality teachers, delivered the skills schools needed, and a majority stayed teaching at the schools for 2 years after their placement. Teach for Australia is currently funded in small blocks. I reckon a program like this would benefit from more certainty. Does the government support longer-term funding periods for Teach for Australia and similar programs?
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President, and thanks, Senator Tyrrell. I particularly want to thank you on behalf of my family, most of whom are teachers or have been teachers. And I think we all... are you questioning something, Senator Hughes?
Minister Watt, please continue.
And I think we all understand the incredibly valuable role that teachers play in our community, educating younger people in school environments and preparing them for the future. I'm happy to seek some advice. I'm happy to seek some advice, Senator Tyrrell, on the specific question about the Teach for Australia program and the government's intentions for that.
Senator Henderson, Minister Watt, please resume your seat. Minister Watt, resume your seat. Senator Henderson, just cut the running dialogue. Senator Henderson, you're not in a debate with me. I've asked you to be silent. That is what I expect. Minister Watt, please continue.
They don't like being over there, Senator President, so I understand you being a bit tetchy.
Minister Watt. Minister Wong. Order. Senator Cash. I have a minister on her feet.
Well,
Minister
point of
Wong.
order. Senator Henderson, who has been unable to stop interjecting for most of question time, you asked her not to. The minister stood and she immediately started again. Immediately. And I really would ask her, could we at least have a few seconds between interjections?
Thank you. Minister Wong. Senator Henderson.
On the point of order, and in my defence, Senator Watt actually interjected in the last interjection.
Senator Henderson, please resume your seat. Senator Henderson, that is not a point of order. I do remind senators, as you are all well aware, if you make an interjection, the minister is well within his or her rights to respond to it. If you don't want to be called out, keep silent. Minister Watt, please continue.
Thank you, President. So, as I was saying, Senator Tyrrell, I'll seek some further information for you from Minister Clare about the specific program you're referring to, but I might just quickly take the opportunity to give you some further information about the work the government is doing in relation to the teacher workforce generally. We do acknowledge there is a teacher shortage in Australia, and it is 10 years in the making. Too few people have been becoming teachers and too many have been leaving. In December 2022, Education Ministers agreed to the National Teacher Workforce Action Plan, which sets out a clear pathway to address teacher workforce shortages. And for the first time, the Commonwealth, state and territory governments are working together to tackle this issue. A novel concept, I understand, for people opposite, working together with state and territory governments. But as a result of that, we have 27 actions in train across 5 priority areas: improving teacher supply, strengthening initial teacher education, keeping the teachers we have, elevating the profession and better understanding future teacher workforce needs. So there's no doubt whatsoever that we do need to invest in the teaching workforce. All research indicates that the best thing you can do for kids' education is invest in their teachers, and that's what we'll keep doing.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Tyrrell, first supplementary.
Thanks, President. So if this program is meeting the Australian government's objective to provide high-quality education in disadvantaged areas, would the Albanese government support long-term funding, say 5-year blocks, for programs like Teach for Australia to provide teachers with more support in their employment and reassuring the communities they're amazing teachers?
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister Watt.
I don't need help, Senator McKenzie. I'm quite okay, thanks. I'm quite okay. And I definitely don't need any colour-coded spreadsheets with advice to me, Senator McKenzie.
Minister
I
Watt,
definitely don't need that.
I am going to remind you to address your comments to the chair.
President, again, I've already said to Senator Tyrrell that if I have any further information to provide about that specific program, I will do so. But again, to give you an indication, some of the things that we are doing, we've awarded the first round of Commonwealth teaching scholarships to around 1,000 first-year teacher education students across the country. Scholarship recipients receive up to $10,000 a year while they are studying and then commit to teach for a period of time after they graduate. Under the $30 million Workload Reduction Fund, we're piloting new approaches to take pressure off teacher and school leaders, such as employing more support staff to undertake administrative tasks. Minister Clare will soon be announcing the outcomes of the latest High Achieving Teachers program grant round. Over the next 3 years, this program will support 1,500 people to become teachers through employment-based pathways, and I think that may actually be the program you're talking about under a different name.
Your time for answering has expired. Senator Tyrrell, second supplementary.
Well, he's pretty much answered all the questions I have, so I could ask it again, but thank you, Minister Watt. I appreciate your time. Bowing out.
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Senator Mackenzie.
Okay, thank you. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Regional Development, Senator McCarthy. Many small businesses in regional Australia have been shocked at the impact of Labor's industrial relations agenda, especially measures like multi-employer bargaining and right to disconnect laws that were never revealed by the Labor Party prior to the election. At the National Press Club yesterday, Minister Watt was asked by David Crowe if Labor will put your IR agenda to voters or will there be some surprises after the election. In response, the minister said, well, I think governments always take items to an agenda and then deliver extra things after they're elected. Ooh. To reassure small businesses in regional Australia, will the minister rule out surprise and unwelcome Labor industrial relations reform after the election, or should they brace for more unwelcome surprises from Labor?
Minister Wong. Order.
Point of order. I mean, the question, I know it does have regions in the question, but it clearly, in policy terms, relates to the bloke sitting next to her. Now, I know you're scared of asking him a question, but he is available.
Senator Birmingham.
President, on the point of order, and indeed I took a similar point of order on the 12th of September when government senators had asked then Minister Watt, who was acting as the minister representing the Minister for Regional Development, specific questions about tax cuts and energy relief, matters not at all relevant to his portfolio, but the questions were framed in their impact on regional Australians and regional development. This question was very clearly framed in relation to regional Australia and regional development, and I'd invite you to uphold your words that you said on the 12th of December that you can advise the chamber that, as the repping Minister for Regional Development, it can be answered in that capacity as the questions were asked.
Thank you very much, Senator Birmingham. I'm very pleased that you take an avid interest in the rulings I make from the chair. I will seek the advice of the clerk. And I will give similar advice that I will invite the minister to answer the question to the extent that it relates to regional Australia and that part of your portfolio, or the portfolio you're representing.
Thank you, President. And certainly I listened to Senator Watt at the Press Club yesterday, and it was a fantastic Press Club delivery by Senator Watt on all the things that we're doing here in the Albanese government right across Australia, in particular in regional Australia. And we know that millions of small businesses are the engine room of our nation's economy, and I would gladly invite Senator Watt to be able to tell you all about the small businesses in our economy.
Senator Mackenzie, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister, for not answering the question about surprise announcements for regional Australians. Regional Australians, especially small businesses in the regions, are also being crippled by spiralling electricity bills under the Albanese Labor government. Regional households were even promised that their electricity bills would be $275 lower under Labor. Will regional Australians see that $275 price reduction in 25, 26 or any time in the future?
Thank you, Senator Mackenzie. Minister McAllister.
President,
I beg your pardon, Minister McCarthy.
I just want to clarify, this is the electricity bill that the opposition voted against, giving support and relief in terms of the subsidies.
Please resume your seat. Order. 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 Senator Mackenzie.
I'm just seeking the opportunity to clarify for the minister what I was talking about.
Senator Mackenzie, you've asked your question. Order. Order! Order! Senator Cash, I've called and called you. Come to order or leave the chamber. Order. Senator Ayres. And just a moment, Minister. Senator Colbeck, equally, I've called your name a number of times. If you can't stop yourself interjecting, and it is your responsibility, not mine, then please leave the chamber. Minister McCarthy.
So, President, just confirming that this was the energy relief that the opposition said no to in the Senate to try to relieve the cost of pressure.
Minister McCarthy, please resume your seat. Senator McKenzie.
Point of order, Standing Order 191 explanation, where if what I've said has been misunderstood, I am able to be afforded the opportunity to explain. The 275 was never a piece of legislation before.
Senator McKenzie, we're not getting.
We didn't have the opportunity to back that.
Senator McKenzie, resume your seat. Senator McKenzie, order across the chamber. You were given the opportunity to make a point of order. I listened to your point of order. I've said in this chamber over and over again, you make the point of order, you don't then make a political statement. I think we're very clear, Senator McKenzie, that the minister is using it as a rhetorical device, but I will continue to listen carefully to her answer. Minister McCarthy.
Yes, thank you, President, and thank you, Senator, for the question. I mean, there is nothing, President, that the opposition won't seek to politicise. When they left office, the average wholesale energy price was 286 megawatts per hour, and just like we inherited a 6.1% inflation rate, the coalition will not take responsibility for the messes that they left. Now we hear them. Even though they voted against the opportunity for Australians to have cheaper energy across Australia, they voted against cheaper bills, and that is all they have to say.
Senator McKenzie? Oh. When you finish, Senator Hughes. Senator McKenzie.
Regional Australians are being smashed by high inflation, high electricity bills, productivity-crushing industrial relations reforms and the growing rejection of major job-creating developments, including mines in regional Australia. Just how many regional Australians are losing their businesses or homes because of Labor's woeful economic management, Minister?
Thank you, Senator McKenzie. Minister McCarthy. Thank you, President. Well, I stood in the Senate here yesterday and spoke about the $4 billion that is going into regional and remote areas of the Northern Territory, 270 houses per year.
Senator McKenzie.
1,200 of...
Minister, please resume your seat. Minister Wong.
Well,
Senator McKenzie,
manage to just be quiet for a bit.
The running dialogue at full voice is incredibly disrespectful to me in particular, as I have called you to order over and over and over again. Minister McCarthy, please continue.
Thank you, President. So our focus is on regional and remote Australia, as it is for all Australians, in the cities as well. Our government is for all Australians, including remote and regional Australia.
Thank you. Senator Rennick.
My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. ATO figures show that the median superannuation balance for males aged 60 to 64 is $211,000 and for women $158,000, below the pension asset threshold of $314,000. This means over 50% of people about to retire will still receive a full pension, the same percentage of retirees when superannuation began in 1992. Superannuation tax concessions cost the budget $50 billion a year plus $30 billion in fees. Yet most of these concessions and fees go to the upper 30% of income earners. The pension funds 70% of retirees at a cost of $54 billion. Why does the Albanese Labor government believe that superannuation can provide a good retirement for low-income earners when it clearly isn't achieving that goal?
Thank you, Senator Rennick. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Rennick for the question. I hadn't expected that question from you, Senator Rennick, but we are strong supporters of superannuation, but at the same time we recognise that for the aged pension is an important social safety net, and that at times people will rely completely on the aged pension, or they will have a mix of aged pension with some superannuation in their retirement years. And as the superannuation system matures, we expect more people will benefit from higher incomes in retirement through the superannuation system. But we also acknowledge that the aged pension is there as that social safety net. Obviously, we are big supporters of super, and increasing the superannuation threshold is part of that. But we have some legislation in this chamber now to I guess, decrease some of the concessionality for high balance super accounts, still highly concessional in the taxation system, but less concessional. And we would like that legislation progressed in the first instance. But we certainly strongly support the superannuation system. The concessions that are around it for a reason, and we accept also that the aged pension will be an important social safety net for those on low incomes, even if they supplement it somewhat with their superannuation balance.
Senator Rennick, first supplementary.
On average, men will retire with approximately 35% more superannuation than women, as many women choose to stay home for some of their career to raise their children. Wouldn't it make more sense to reduce superannuation tax concessions and instead lift the pension and cut tax on low-income earners so that they and stay-at-home parents can live a better life in retirement?
Thank you, Senator Rennick. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, Senator Rennick, and I thank you for the question on women and super, and it is really important, and I'm happy to have further discussions with you about what we can do to make it a fairer and better system for women. Obviously, the passage of the paid parental leave or super on PPL bill that passed this place this morning is an important step, as is increasing wages in those highly feminised industries like aged care and early education and care, and for workers on the minimum wage, because those wage increases will actually flow through and contribute to higher superannuation balances as well. But I'm open to further discussions. Indeed, I met this morning with Hester, whose membership is 80% women, about improvements that can be made for women's superannuation, because you're right, women on average retire with 25% less super. Women who are older are more economically vulnerable, and we are looking at ways to strengthen that.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Rennick, second supplementary.
Capitalism only occurs when people manage their own capital. This excludes politicians, corporate executives and superannuation funds who manage other people's money. However, politicians and corporate boards are at least elected by taxpayers and shareholders. Do the boards of superannuation funds have to be elected by their members? If not, why not? Shouldn't members get a say in who manages their money?
Thank you, Senator Rennick. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, the superannuation legislation is clear around the governance arrangements for superannuation funds, and they are accountable to their members, and they must act in the best interest of their members. I mean, that is a requirement of the legislation. So there are very tight laws and governance arrangements through APRA that are there precisely for that reason. I mean, members of superannuation funds are not often the most engaged members with what's happening with their accounts. We would like to see more engagement, of course, with people's superannuation arrangements, but the reality is, certainly for large periods of people's careers, they're not, and therefore the laws and regulations and oversight of that industry is really important. And I think the balance between APRA, the superannuation legislation and all of the other accountability mechanisms ensure the best interests of members are paramount.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Thorpe.
President, my question is for the Minister for Indigenous Australians, Minister McCarthy. Minister, you've stated that one of your priorities is to stop politicians using First Peoples as a political football. Your government said it is committed to truth-telling. If we want to talk about truth, let's talk about how over 98% of First People in this country have been wiped out in less than 300 years. There have been over 500 documented massacres, and our children are still being removed and locked up at growing rates. Minister, do you acknowledge that since colonisation, governments have implemented genocidal policies against First Peoples?
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Minister McCarthy.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Thorpe, for the question. I think it's probably my first question from you as Minister. What I will say is that the history of this, first at question time, you've had plenty in estimates. There's no doubt about that, and I'm sure there'll be more to come. But certainly the history of this country is fraught with policies that have impacted very negatively the lives of First Nations people, whether it's to do with the stolen generations now in terms of the high rates of removals from the 1800s right up to the 1970s. What this government has done has redressed those issues in trying to work with the stolen generations reparations.
Minister McCarthy, please resume your seat. Senator Thorpe.
Relevance. It was about genocidal policies against us. It wasn't about what her government's doing.
Senator Thorpe, there was a significant preamble to the last part of your question, which the minister is entitled to address and is addressing. Minister McCarthy.
Thank you, President. Look, I'm more than happy for people to watch. I think it's important that people should see what democracy is all about and how debates take place in this Senate, those that are sensible and those that are nonsensical. But I will say this, that the policies of the past have impacted First Nations people, President. We are seeing that addressed in the redress, as I was saying to the Senate today, in terms of the stolen generations. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of families across Australia still traumatised by the policies of the day, by governments from way back in the 1800s through to the 1970s. And I know that the Parliament of Australia today is acutely aware of that. Was it the right thing to do?
Please resume your seat. Senator Thorpe.
Point of order, relevance.
The minister is being directly relevant to your question, Senator Thorpe. Please resume your seat. Minister McCarthy.
So the trauma, President, that many First Nations families experienced throughout that history still occurs today in this country. The trauma that impacts our families results in the high rates of removals of our children from their families, but it also results in the high rates of incarceration in our justice systems across the country. And that is why the National Agreement on Closing the Gap was implemented, President.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Thorpe, first supplementary.
The Bringing Them Home report concluded that the policies of forcible removal of our children were genocidal in intent. Minister, do you agree with the finding of the Bringing Them Home report that government actions in this country have constituted genocide?
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Minister McCarthy.
Thank you, President. The Bring Them Home report was a report that so many families, including my own families, gave evidence to. It was a report, President, that took many years, took thousands of evidence, and
Minister
what it did do
McCarthy,
was—
please resume your seat. Senator Thorpe.
Relevance. It's about genocide.
Senator Thorpe, if I might explain that you— Senator Thorpe, Senator Thorpe, resume your seat. If I might explain, you mentioned in the first part of your question the Bringing Them Home report, which the minister is entitled to confine her remarks to. Senator Thorpe, you are not. Senator Thorpe, you are not in a debate with me. Senator Thorpe, resume your seat. You are not in a debate with me. You've raised a point of order. I've indicated to you there is no point of order. I'm going to invite the minister to continue.
Thank you, President. The Bringing Them Home report and the recommendations of the report were embraced by the Labor Party. In fact, so much so, President, that
Senator
in 2007, when Kevin Rudd became Prime Minister, one of the first things he did in the Australian Parliament was acknowledge the Bringing Them Home report.
Minister McCarthy,
to answer the question of Senator Thorpe was to apologise.
Senator Thorpe, order. Come to order. Minister Wong. Please continue, Minister McCarthy.
So the Bringing Them Home report, President, which I encourage all senators to read, culminated in terms of what happened when Prime Minister Kevin Rudd became Prime Minister, to acknowledge the historical horrors of the removal of First Nations people in this country, which continues today in terms of the redress for those families. I've written to hundreds and hundreds of families across this country in terms of what has happened to them.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Thorpe, I'm trying to give you the respect you are entitled to as a senator in this place, but I would ask that you stop interjecting, and I invite you to put your second supplementary.
Well, thank you, President. As the new minister, you've said truth-telling is important, but you can't give a straight answer. When will you show some leadership and hold your own government to account for the ongoing slow and sophisticated eradication of our people, our children, our culture, or will you just continue to use the approved talking points that protect your colonial masters?
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Minister McCarthy. Order, Senator Giacone. Senator Thorpe is entitled to ask a question. You may not agree with it, but she is entitled, like every senator in this place, and you will listen in respectful silence. Minister McCarthy.
Thank you, President. I do think it's really unfortunate that Senator Thorpe does use the Senate as a place to cause further division for First Nations people in this country. I do believe that Senator Thorpe has a responsibility.
Senator Thorpe.
Point of order. What was that?
Senator Thorpe, that's not a point of order. Please, Senator Thorpe, please resume your seat. Minister McCarthy, please continue.
And, President, I will always use the Senate as an opportunity to bring about greater unity in this country and greater understanding, no matter how appalling our history has been in terms of the high rates of removal, which I ask the senators opposite to show some respect about the high rates of removal of First Nations children in this country.
Minister McCarthy, I have Senator Thorpe on her feet. Senator Thorpe.
President, point of order, relevance. To my question.
The minister is being relevant to your question, Senator Thorpe. You asked the minister about leadership. The minister is talking directly about leadership. Please resume your seat. Minister McCarthy.
And thank you, President. I also thank those Indigenous leaders and families across the country, President, who are working, especially in Victoria, in terms of the push for treaty and the Uruk Commission, and all of those who are working in terms of the high rates of removal of First Nations people, but also right across in the other states and jurisdictions. And I think it's important. We are doing the best that we can, and I do urge all senators, Senator Thorpe included, to remember that this is a place to use for the betterment of our country.
Thank you. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. I ask that further questions be placed on notice, and I also seek leave to move a motion relating to consideration of legislation.